Most games have a pause menu, and in this video I'll show you how to make one that looks like this. Slides in, gives you a couple buttons that you can highlight, and it's not that hard. Okay, let's start with a blank example. Before I show you a pause menu, we should probably have a game, at least something that's moving. So I created a couple sprites that came from the GDevelop asset store. So here they are, but they're not moving yet. Let's see if we can animate them real easy. There's an extension that does this. It's called Travel to Random Positions. You can find that extension by clicking Search for New Extensions. And that's Travel to Random Positions. And I installed it already. And the way you use this extension, we're going to create an event. And let's just search for travel. Make object travel to random positions. So we'll make the guard. Okay. One thing that is required for this extension is you have to assign the pathfinding behavior to each of these objects. And that's actually a built-in behavior. If you click add behavior to the object, you'll see it in here. Pathfinding. So I've already done that. And you have to do it for all three of these. So let's see, I did move guard to random positions. I'm going to try making a group. Let's make a group. We'll call this characters. Oh, it's tricky. All right, we'll throw them in it. Rename the group. Maybe, I don't know what I did wrong, but I always have problems with this group naming. Okay, we have an object group called characters now, and it has those three items in it. So we'll just reference, instead of saying move the guard to random positions, we can actually just reference characters, which is the group. The group's always at the bottom of, like, these are all your objects, and there's a little line there, and below that are the groups. So this is the characters group. And you can set these settings, like this is how far they're going to travel, and you can move them towards an angle, but it's by default they're just going to move randomly. There they go, moving randomly. All right, that's pretty cool, but let's actually be cooler if there was a lot of them. So there's another way you can do that using an extension called the rectangular flood fill extension. And let me just create some areas. That's too many of these. There we go. Okay, this is just the way the flood fill extension works is it takes this object and it starts at the top left, and it basically fills each one of these squares will have a little object in it now. That's an extension that you can. There's rectangular flood fill. So if you search for flood, that's where you find it. Create fill objects that cover the rectangular area of the target objects. So the target objects are these big blocks I drew on the page. So to use that extension, let's just throw it at the beginning, and we're going to rectangular flood fill. So the target object, the duck area, we're going to put the ducks, and we don't have to tell any of the other options. I'll just copy and paste, and then we'll stick the guards in the guard area, and ogres in the ogre area. Whoops, gotta get that right. Ogre area. Okay, basically it's going to create these objects that cover those squares we made. There we go. Now it's a fun game. Look at that. Moving around all crazy. Okay, that's how we've got our game. Now let's build a pause menu for it. The most important thing for a pause menu is to pause the game. Everything else is just cosmetic, right? Let's just start with the functionality. Let's start pausing. I'm going to just group these real fast to make things a little more organized. Setup game. I'll drag those in under that. And this will be the pause menu. The most common way to pause a game is to hit the pause button if it has one, or escape. What I think the escape key is probably the most commonly used. Oops. So if we do a key pressed, escape, we're making a condition. Okay, if the escape key is pressed and we want to do trigger once, you'll almost always want trigger once when you're detecting keystrokes, because even if you press down really quickly, it could trigger many times because the game runs at 60 frames per second. So we just want it to happen one time. And I'm going to use a Boolean scene variable. Boolean variables is a fancy way of saying a true, false, or a yes, no variable. So toggle the Boolean value. And toggle just means to change it to its opposite state. And we'll call this game paused. Will be the name of our variable. By default, all booleans are false. So the first time when the game starts, this game paused is going to be false. And then as soon as you hit escape, the game pause will become true. Hit escape again, and it will go to basically true, false, true, false, true, false. Okay, so that trigger, this condition is good, but all it's going to do is change this variable. So that doesn't actually pause the game. We need to add an event that checks that Boolean variable. So let's look at a condition Boolean variable. Same thing. Game paused. Okay, if the value is true, what do we want to do? We want to stop time, right? So change TimeScale. That's how you do that. TimeScale of 1 is the default. That's what things run at normal speed. You can always make things run faster or slower for slow motion effects. We actually just want to stop time. Right. So if it's true, we go to 0. Problem is we don't have a way of unpausing. So let's just copy paste and do the opposite. Okay, so if the variable is false, game is not paused. Let's go back to 1. Okay, I believe this is the logic we need to just do the basic pausing. So let's test it. Okay, there goes our sprites. They're having fun. Let's hit escape. Okay, they stopped. Good. I'm going to hit escape again. There we go. The variable is getting toggled true, false, true. Actually, true is pause. So this is true, and this is false. Okay, we now have the functionality of pausing, but we don't have a very good user interface to explain what's happening and give the player options of what to do during while the game is paused. So let's do that. Let's start with. Oh, I know what I was going to do. Let's give the user another way to trigger does it look okay? Oh, it's kind of big. That's okay. It's really big. All right, we'll leave it as it is. So this is another sprite, and we're going to use this so that the users can escape, or they can hit this button. So right now, we just have the escape key pressed option. Let's do the button. So the way we're going to trigger that is we have to check for a mouse over. Cursor is on an object. And the burger menu button. Okay, so the cursor is on the button, and we also need a click once. Let's see, mouse button. So left button. So we're gonna have to do something better with this logic, because right now, whenever you add multiple conditions, it's always just and. So all these have to be. So right now, if we did this, you'd have to escape. You'd have to mouse over the burger mouse button, and then you'd have to click left. You have to do all three of those things for this to happen. We don't want all of them to happen. We want to stick an or option in there. So you can do one or the other. So you can do the escape key, or you can do these two. But we got a problem. We have to stick those two. We have to make sure that those two happen at the same time. And that's why there's a condition called and. And is almost always, the only place I can think it makes sense is inside an or, like we're doing. Here we go. This is the and. All these conditions are true. So we're going to stick the touch and the mouse button. We'll stick the mouse button first. The reason I like to do that is it's easier for there's less CPU processing involved to check if a left button mouse is down, as opposed to doing a position check, or even worse if this was like a collision check. That's why it's recommended to do this, because once the game finds out that this button is not down, it won't even perform any other checks like this position check. All right, so this is the or. One of these statements is true. The escape key pressed, or this, which requires both these to be true. So this is a good example of why you would use the and. Okay, let's see if that worked. So we have the escape. Okay, so that's escape still works. Let's try this. Okay, good. So the clicks don't work outside this. It has to be over it. The cursor touch has to be over this, and the left button has to be pushed. And it is a trigger once, which you definitely want the trigger once still. Otherwise, your mouse clicks are still going to be, you could go on, off, on, off, on, off, and it would be kind of random what you actually, the toggle state ended up in. We just want it to be one push down equals one change in the toggle. So that's why trigger once is perfect for this. Okay. All right, so now we have two ways of triggering it, escape and that. Let's do one thing that's common in pause menus is like an overlay, which is like a screen, like a dark background that kind of covers over it. So I have just a black sprite here. It's literally, I just did the paint bucket tool, painted it black. And so that's what I call the pause background. And we could just throw it over here, and it's just going to cover the background. But let's not make it show up. Let's do. We don't want to show up when it's not paused. So let's, at the beginning of the scene, we're going to hide this. Pause background, hide. Okay. Oh, I'm also going to create a pause layer. Oh, I already did. So if you click add a layer, it'll just throw it on top, call it layer. So we already have this pause layer. So what you do is you select the object, which is this pause background, and here's where you select the layer. So this is now the pause layer. And the way layers actually serve two purposes. One purpose is for ordering. So this is the stack. So see how the pause is laying on top? It's just like if you had 3 sheets of paper. The pause sheet of paper is going to cover anything below it. But maybe I don't want to do 100% opacity. Let's set it to maybe half opacity. So opacity is how can you see through an object, and by default you cannot see through an object. That's 255 is the default opacity. So if we go to 128, this will now, the opacity will be half, and you'll be able to see a little bit underneath it. Alright, so we're going to hide it in the beginning, and down here, where if the game is paused, we want to not hide it, we want to show it. And then if the game paused is false, we want to hide it again. Okay, so it's hidden. That's what we told it to do at the beginning of the scene, hide that background. And we're going to go to pause. And what happened is it showed the pause background. And see how everything looks kind of grayed out? That's because of the opacity is 128. We're seeing through that pause background now. What if we make this slide in instead of like a bam, instantly? Let's make the pause background slide in. Okay, there's a lot of ways to do that. Here's the way that I'm going to show you. We're going to bring our pause background and pull it below, right straight down. And you see that black line? That black line is the visibility, like that's the edge. Basically, I'm going to use my arrow keys and go up till we're just about at that line. And let's see if we can make this go up and down. To do that, we're going to do the second purpose of layers, and that is camera movement. I started off saying that there's two reasons that you have layers, and the first one was ordering. The second reason is for camera movement. So you can each layer has basically its own camera. So if we want to move everything in a layer, we would move its the camera of that layer. So that's what we're going to do. So because I have that all the way down at the bottom, you're not going to see it. It's down there at the bottom. But if we can bring it up and down, that would be, I think, more interesting. And we're going to use a very useful tool that is probably going to seem confusing the first time you see it, but once you understand it, it'll be useful in your games. It's called lerp. It's linear interpolation. And so we're going to use that to adjust these camera positions. We want the camera movement to happen based off this game paused variable. So I'd like to clean this up a little bit. Let's move these items to a sub event. And basically I'm going to break it into two things that are triggered once, and things that are not triggered once. Setting the timescale is definitely just need to set it once. The show and the hide only needs to happen once. Let's do it for this one as well. We have this pause object down below, so we need to move it up, and we're going to change the Y value of the camera to do that. So let's click on an action, camera, and we want the Y position of the camera. We're going to be changing the pause layer, and what we're going to set the value to is this is where we're going to use lerp. Actually, I'll tell us here. So lerp has 3 numbers, and basically the first number is the number, basically your starting number, so whatever number you start here, and this is where you want it to go to. So it's kind of like a start to finish, and then the last number is how many percent do you want it to move towards the finish each time that lerp is run. And because I took off that trigger once, lerp's going to be running about 60 frames a second. And the cool thing about lerp, if you do it this way, you actually use lerp in a ton of different ways, but the way I'm showing you, we're going to start at the current camera Y value for pause, and we're going to move it to the camera Y of the base layer plus the scene window height. So scene window height is a dynamic variable that basically it's the height of the game. We're gonna pick a position that's one screen height bigger. All right, I have a problem in my this is a common thing in GDevelop. If you see red, don't go away because you have a problem in your formula. All right, we got our camera. Oh, I forgot to do the third magic number in lerp. Remember, lerp has 3. There should be a comma, comma, and then the third one. And that's going to be here. And remember I said it's percent of the way you want to go. It's common to use 5 or 10%. You can use anything really between 0 and 1. In the beginning, it's going to move fast, and as it gets closer, that 10% is going to be smaller because the distance between these two values will get closer to each other, and so it'll move slower because the 10%, it's always just 10% of that remaining distance. So we'll see how this looks. Okay, no more red, we're happy. And that's for when the game pause is true. Let's do the exact same thing, only this is when the game pause is false. We need to get it out of there, so we're just going to remove this extra height we gave it. Okay, let's see if this even looks right. Okay, there's no game paused. Game paused. Look at that. Whoosh, whoosh. Okay. Alright, well, that's kind of a cool effect. Let's add some buttons while it's up. Kind of a side benefit of building the pause layer down here is that we don't have to build it all on top of each other. You actually can do that, and you would just like hide the layer while you're working on it. That would stop you from like accidentally clicking on the base layer objects. But I'm just going to build it down here. So we want, I think I have, oh yeah, so I have a game paused. We need to stick that on the pause layer. And then I have 3 buttons. See how like by default buttons show up on the base layer? That's why they are not visible until you can actually multi-select these, change them to the pause layer. Alright, so now they're on the pause layer. I have an extra one of these. I must have done a control or shift move, which makes a copy. So if you click on an object and do a control click, you can actually make lots of copies, which I accidentally did. I have some text, and text has the same thing. They're both on the base layer by default, and we want to change them to the pause layer. Alright, we'll just kind of get these close to center. So everything here is on the pause layer. So because we're moving the camera, they should come up. You may notice I have this cool purple color around them, but you don't see it here. I can tell you what I did to make that happen. You double click on your objects, click to effects. I clicked add effect, and I choose the type of glow. Glow is one of my favorites, and I just pick this color. I think I may have increased the outer strength from the default to make it a little thicker. So that's what makes that. In fact, this I also have it on this burger menu item. Burger menu button. That's a mouthful. Okay. So while we're talking about effects, on all of my, this is like one of my second favorite effect is called outline. And so I love to do a white text like this. All these are white text. And I like to do the effect of outline on the text. And so I have a black outline. I think that's the default settings. So you can see that black outline. I think adds a lot of contrast, and it looks really cool. I like it. I like high contrast things. I like when things are easy to read and they don't blend in. And you can actually put this white text on even something like this gray. So this gray is pretty light. So if you just had white on gray, there's not a lot of contrast between those two. That's why that black outline works great. So you can have the white text on dark or light colored objects and it still is readable. However, I want it so that if you moused over these, the glow would only be on the one that the mouse is over. So we can do that. Let's create a group called buttons and see if we can do it in one event. Rename this to buttons. Add the button objects. Okay, now we have a group called buttons. This is basically just based off the mouse position. So we're going to say buttons and let's see, mouse, cursor. The cursor touches on an object. Let's see if this works. This is actually, the cursor touch is on buttons. Okay, so one thing that I will mention, when I made my effect called glow, by default the effect name is effect, and you can just leave it as effect, but I decided to make it a little more obvious what's happening, so I called the effect name glow. And we're going to do an event that basically references that name. So if we click on buttons and effect, we can enable an object effect. And I called it glow. You could call anything. By default, it would just say effect here. And what we're going to say is, if the cursor touches on a button, enable the glow on buttons. Yes. And then we also want the opposite of that, right? So I'm going to copy and paste. So we want the reverse. So cursor not on buttons. We want the enable effect glow on buttons to be no. Now, I'm going to show you what this does, but I think you're going to have to do a little bit extra work. Let's test this out. We're basically just seeing if the glow turns on and off on the buttons. Okay, so by default, the effect is on. Let's turn it off at the beginning of this scene. I'm going to copy this. Copy, paste. So enable effect glow on buttons, no. So now by default, it should be off. What is it not? No. Why is it not turning off? Oh, those turned off. Oh, I must have not put it. Yep. See, this works wonderful. I need to get that guy into this group. That's why he's not being changed. Let's go to our buttons group. Throw the burger menu button in there. Okay, now it should, there we go. So when the cursor is over the button, an object in the button group, the effect of glow will turn on, and then when you move it off, off. So now we have all these things. However, these buttons don't do anything. They look like they should, right? They've got great text. They highlight when you click on them, but we need to do some actions. So let's do that. Okay, I want to do some quick cleanup. Let's do some groups. Manage glow. Button glow. Oops. There we go. Alright, so what we want is while the game is paused, we want these buttons to work. So I'm going to create a new group, or a new event under the condition of the game pause is true. And we're going to check for those buttons. So let's check for the blue button. This is similar to what we've done before. Cursor and mouse button pressed, left button. And we'll change the order so it's clicking first, checking for that. Oh, we can actually, let's do these as sub-events. So we're going to check if the mouse left button is down, and that'll be shared for all of these. So I'm just going to copy these. So we have the blue button, the gray button, and the yellow button. Okay, so when the game is paused and someone's clicked on the left button, the actions we will take, I actually forgot what these are. So, okay, so blue is return to game. What does return to game mean? It means just unpause it. The simplest way to do that, let's just copy, oh, we could copy this. Toggle the Boolean variable game paused. Well, we already know the game pause is true, so let's just toggle it. I could say go to, maybe just, it might be smart to just do that. Let's, so I could leave it like this. It would work, but maybe it says saying toggle. I'll just set it because it's returned to game. Game paused, false. The game will no longer be false. The game will no longer be paused after I do this. In fact, let's just try it. It should work. We didn't finish those other buttons. Okay, so these buttons don't work. This button works. Oh, yeah, look at that. You can see them sliding. And I noticed earlier that you could not see this black outline slide, and that's because we hide it. Let's just not do the hide show anymore because we moved it down. And when I first started off, it was in the main screen. Now it's not in the main screen. There we go. I was wondering what was happening. We were hiding it, and so as soon as you click this, it would hide it, and you wouldn't get to see it go down so smoothly. Alright, as far as this blue button, return to game, it works just like hitting escape. So escape works. You can click this button, or you can click return to game. All of those ways work for unpausing. Okay, the next one's quit game. That's the silver button. So if we're clicking the left button and we were hovering over gray button, quit, there's actually an action for that. Quit. Quit the game. That's easy. Let's make this a trigger once, because that would make sense for a left click. Alright, so gray button is quit now. Alright, gray button, test it. Boom, the game quit itself. So pause, unpause, quit. That works. And the yellow button is restart the scene. So the way you do that is there's an action for managing scenes. You want to say change the scene. And the example we're working on is this new example. So the yellow button will now change to the scene new example. As you can see, we're already in new example. That basically means restart it. Let's test it out. Restart the scene. Yeah, see, those sprites went back to their positions in their blocks. That's where they were created. So it's definitely restarting the scene. Okay, I think we've got a working pause menu that looks kind of cool. And I hope you learned some things while we were doing it. If you have questions, let me know. You can respond on YouTube comments, or I spend a ton of time in the GDevelop Discord server. Oh, and I recently started my own Discord server. I should probably do a plug for that. So Victor's Games has one. I'll put a link to that for this video. So yeah, come hang out with us in the Victor's Games Discord server. I'd love to see you guys and answer any questions you have about these videos. I should probably create a channel for that, huh? Okay, we'll see if anybody shows up. All right, guys. Thanks a bunch, and talk to you later.